Hello, everybody. This is my new podcast, the Nolan Bylenga Show. It's episode 1. And for this podcast, I'm inviting on Garison Alger, longtime friend. He is an LMC on his way to becoming a pastor, and he's going to share with us some of his experiences and what he's trying to do.
Thank you, Nolan. Can I start this out by reading a Bible verse real quick, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. Do your thing.
It's Hebrews 6:10. Now in the NIV, it says, God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them.
Read that one more time. I want to hear it again.
God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them.
I like that. I like that.
I like that. We'll bring that back up later.
All right. So tell the viewers of my podcast what you're trying to do, becoming a pastor, your experiences, the direction you're headed, all that good information.
So I'm an LMC, which stands for local ministerial candidate. And basically what I do is I serve my local church as a leader. And typically for me, that's through worship. I've worked with the youth group a lot, but also I am doing some biblical study, specifically about Free Methodist history and polity through Asbury Theological Seminary.
Through Asbury Theological Seminary. Is that that's the school that you're going to, or explain to me how that works?
Yes, so that's the school that I'm going to. They have a certificate program that specifically is lent to members of the Free Methodist Church. You don't have to be on a ministerial path to take it. There's a lot of people actually that just want to learn more about Free Methodist history and polity.
Sounds like some Christian music in the background.
I need to take a phone call. Is that gonna be horrible?
We can just restart it, I guess.
Yeah. So the certificate program isn't specific necessarily to people on a ministerial path. It's also available to members of the church, which there's a surprising amount of people that are taking these classes with me that just want to learn more about Free Methodism and where it came from and where it's heading and what the goals are specifically of that denomination.
Yeah, but for you, that's the path for you to become a pastor, and you start moving that direction, and they've laid out.
Yes.
Cool.
That's the education portion for me that is left that I need to move farther.
What would be the next step? Where do you go next after you finish those classes if you continue that trajectory?
So the next step would be get your CMC. So you would be a conference ministerial candidate. So the the Free Methodist Church has different conferences, right? So I'm in the River Conference as an LMC for Creekside. The River Conference goes all the way from Washington down to Texas and pretty far. Like it's a pretty big area. But my mentoring pastor my former mentoring pastor was originally from a conference that encompassed Detroit. So he had transferred over to ours. I'd met him. We'd begun our mentoring relationship. So instead of serving my local church, I would serve the conference as a whole, right? That's when you can start getting into sometimes you can become an associate pastor at churches, right? Wherever they need an associate pastor, the conference can say, we need you to go over here, instead of just like your local church saying, hey, we need a hand at the potluck.
Yeah, you're serving like the bigger picture rather than just that small group of folks that you started out with so much.
Exactly.
It's just interesting. What made you decide that you were going to go that direction to become a pastor?
I hate this question so much. I hate it because I get asked every time I have to interview for something for a higher up position, right? Then they have to ask it. But
it is. It's a normal question. Well, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where
It's the
It's
problem
just
is it's
about
not so
you.
much the
Like, what's
question.
your motivation?
It's not so much the question as it is the answer is not simple. So I
Is it,
grew up in the Free Methodist Church. That was the church that I had gone to from a very young age, as young as I can remember, all the way to now. And I had always felt as though like that I had something to say that Jesus was putting on my heart, and I just didn't know like the avenues to get to being a pastor or to ministering to people well. And so I had been on mission trips and stuff. I've gone to Mexico. We did Bridgetown in Portland. We've sent our youth group to Alaska, um, all these different places. And it was like, well, there's got to be a way that I can serve people consistently instead of just doing these little trips. And so I just was at worship practice, and I looked over at the youth pastor at our church and I said, "Hey, how does somebody become a pastor? Like, what does that look like?" And he said, "Can you still hear me?"
yeah, you're good. I can
Okay,
hear
sorry,
you. I
something
can
popped
see
up.
you.
But he basically said, "Why are you interested in becoming a pastor?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we have to set up a meeting and talk about it, and then can become, uh, I can become your mentoring pastor. We can see where you're at, where your knowledge of the Bible is, where your heart's at. Your head, heart, and hands is like their big thing, right? Like,
Hmm.
just measuring these different things on a scale to understand where your faith is and where it's going. And then they mentor you in the direction, right? And they figure out what you need to become a pastor. So, like, part of it for me was, well, you have a little bit of schooling to do. And so, like, on some, mostly it's theology and then the Wesleyan history and polity. Um, and we had that discussion and it went really well. And he said he thought that I had a heart for ministry and that it was in God's plan to have me go down the ministerial path. So, partially down it now.
You started going in that direction, and you're not going to look back.
Yep, I just said this
Oh
is
yeah.
what I'm doing, and it's been about 2.5 years since I started, and haven't regretted it for a second.
That's good to hear. Well, I know in today's day and age, especially with like the political world, uh, there's a lot of people that have a negative perception of Christianity, and they tie it to more so a political movement rather than the movement of Jesus. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's something I think about is being a candidate for office and explaining to people, well, like I follow Jesus for X, Y, and Z. Jesus' message
Right.
was to show love. And what are your thoughts on that in terms of the aspect of Christianity and politics, or should it be removed and us try to not fuse the two?
So I have had some tough conversations with um, congregation members a lot, but also with a few um, pastors that I have pretty good relationships with. And the hard thing for uh, people within the church to understand is the separation between church and state. And as somebody who has been involved in politics, I've come to understand that you can't just push the two together, because the problem is if you push Christianity on everybody, right, and then you make that your entire government is just this, like, this is a Christian country, which for the most part it is. Um,
So
the
it's
hard
founded
part
on the
is,
basis of like Christian fundamental, and
yes. But the
barring
hard
some
but the
things
hard
here and
part
there. But
is if we start going and enforcing our belief systems on everybody else, there's no freedom of religion anymore. And so that's really
exactly,
hard
exactly.
to separate those two things, right? You get into a lot of political issues where it's like, me personally, I would never do this. I would never support this, but from a political standpoint, it kind of makes sense.
Mhm. Well, see,
No.
there's because there is a difference between governing and your own personal convictions and how you're going to live life, And so,
Right.
uh, it's it is an interesting thing. I think that people people should be trying to just show love to other people. I think like that's the message of Christianity rather than trying to implement
Exactly.
all these policies. It's like how can you do your best to personally follow, Jesus?
Well, and
And
the hard thing for me is, I want everybody to know Jesus. Like, I want to help all my friends and everybody I meet to have a relationship with Jesus. Uh, and so that gets a little tough sometimes when you get into like political conversation. Um, but it's you learn how to have those conversations, and like you learn how to talk about things like abortion comes up a lot, obviously.
mhm.
And so talking about that, regardless of what my religious opinion is, right, on like what that constitutes biblically, what does it mean as
It's a
a
difference between what your decision would be rather than how
then
you
then
think the
what should yeah
government should.
then how the government should like handle it legally, right?
Yeah.
Now for me those things happen to just align on that particular subject, but there's a lot of stuff you get almost, it feels like a gray area, but I think you make it a little bit more black and white, the more that you start to separate your politics specifically from your belief system. Now there will never be a complete separation. That's impossible. You can't do that. You always, as a Christian, at least for me, I'm always going to have a bias towards my belief system.
Well, of course, everybody's got a bias towards something, and that's the thing is, how do you? This is something that I've, always said. You've heard me say it before. Is try to be disciplined with yourself, but lenient with
Mm-hmm.
others. To where, like, when you're practicing your own religion, there's this aspect of, like, of course, I have the freedom to practice my religion, and I'll be as
Mm-hmm.
disciplined as I want to be in that aspect of practicing my religion. But there's this aspect in Christianity where your goal is not to judge other people per se. And
Exactly.
so that's where that leniency with other folks comes in. Is it's not about the
Right.
control of, but
You know what they call that lenience? Call that grace.
grace.
I mean, grace is a huge part of Jesus's message in the Bible.
100%.
Is to show
Jesus
people
on the
grace.
cross got all these people that hate this man, and they put him on a cross, and they're crucifying him, and he says that when he's dying, essentially, like, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do, and
Mm-hmm.
he's finding understanding, for those folks that are doing so much wrong to him, which is
Exactly.
it's a thing that people have trouble with. It's like the message of loving your enemies. Who wants to love their enemies, right? But
It, yeah, it's
it's a
really hard.
very different message from what everything else is telling you. It's
Right. And you look at a man who went through such terrible atrocities, right? And then to think that he still loves those people, that's a lot. That's a lot to like really let that sink in. And I think something that people need to do a little bit more is take Jesus's perspective here, right? These people are killing you, you know. They're
exactly.
they're crucifying you, and you love them. I don't know how capable I would be of being crucified by somebody and then just being like, "Oh, well, I love them." That's
Yeah,
tough.
that's
That's
something
tough.
that people struggle with. But
Hmm.
that's where it comes in is following Jesus. What would it look like for you, or does it look like for you to follow Jesus, to be a disciple of Jesus, particularly?
So I think the thing that, if you wanted to simplify it as much as possible, um, just love one another. Above all else, love one another is the most important thing. I don't think I don't think there's hate anywhere in the Gospels. I don't think, like, from Jesus. And people tend to forget that, especially in politics. They love to hate people, man. It's just how it
Everything
goes.
is it's feels like sometimes everything is a hate movement,
It's
you
I
know.
think
So
I think everything that we're called to do as disciples of Christ ultimately comes down to love one another, right? Care of
yep, I'd
creation,
agree 100%.
love God's creation and take care of it, right? You even look at like the 10 commandments. You can't love somebody and murder them.
Yeah,
Like that doesn't make a
exactly.
whole lot of sense. Um, but yeah, ultimately I think that love is the key to being a good fisher of men.
Hmm. I would agree 100% on that. I think that's a central message that we should all be trying to push that out. That's actually something I've thought about, where when you get into the political realm, is the difference between, let's say, the right and the left. Is there's a lot of
Mhm.
Christians in the Republican Party, and there's a lot of people in the Democrat Party that there's Christians in the Democrat Party too, but there's a lot of people where they'll put up signs that say like love all over the place, you know, like love,
Mhm.
and that's something where different types of people can come together on, is we can find an
Right.
agreement of probably one of the, if not the strongest value or quality, you know, that there is just that
Mhm.
concept of loving other people. And no, that's a uniting factor just in general. You know,
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
it's a message that nobody else is saying, you know, but except for, you know, Jesus is saying it, but we need to emphasize that message.
Oh, exactly. I have an intrusive thought to throw out here. I wonder if like any like Hobby Lobbies or like decor stores that are like near churches just have a whole lot of live laugh on the shelf and all the loves have been bought by the church.
Oh man, I've seen those memes where you know, people going around their house being like, "Live, laugh, love, live, laugh, love, live." And I saw a thing where
Oh,
it just filled this woman's house with just that, you
oh,
know.
dude, it's crazy. Oh,
Oh yeah. In today's day and age, though, is we see this issue of young people. There's young people that are still in the church, but it seems like young people are becoming less. They're becoming less interested in Christianity and religion in that sense. So,
right.
to reach those young folks, do you think there's anything that we could be doing better to get that message across?
I think that the younger generation, and this includes our generation, and
Mhm. Well, we're Gen
they,
Z technically, you know.
yeah, but it's so different, and it's become very hard to communicate with the younger generations now. Like even being a part of that generation, it's been tough, and society has kind of started to push our younger generations in directions that um, a lot of older people just don't understand, right? They push them
Hmm.
to places. There's a lot of me, and I need to do this, I am this, right? And it's always like it's kind of pushing towards a very self-centered place where I need to discover myself before I discover anything else, including Jesus. So there's no open slot for Jesus until people find themselves through whatever vices they choose, right? A lot of that stuff that I've seen comes from these communities that get created where a few people will be like, well, we found ourselves and it's right here in this little community, right? And so
Hmm.
how do you penetrate that community and then communicate Jesus inside of space that is completely void of him at all?
Yeah. Well, exactly. You know, I think there's
Right.
people that are coming up with some interesting things, you know, right? I saw a thing and I found it. I wanted to pull it up and I'm going to read it to you. It's called the Gen Z Bible. I don't know whether you'd call this blasphemous. I don't know whether you'd call this innovative in a new way to get a point across, but there's a point in it. It says, chapter 3, Annunciation. That's what it says. Mary was a pick me girl for God and was simping for him in prayer. When the angel Gabriel appeared to her and said, Ayo, you're a real one, and the top G is feeling you. but she thought his compliment was sus and gave him the side eye. That's the kind of language this is using. I won't read it all, but when you think about that, that's
I
that's a wild way. But it goes into the conversation of
I get it,
it,
but
can you make a
I
new
don't.
translation to get a story across, or should
I
you try to stay in those
I'm,
traditional ways of giving a story?
I get what they're going for. I don't know that I would use that language to describe Mary or how God or how Jesus came to be as far as immaculate
Oh,
conception
and
goes.
here
I don't
it
like it.
says,
It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. It feels rude in nature, but I get what they're going for. I mean, it's like the Message Bible. People didn't like the Message Bible because it like they were like, oh, it's like a street Bible, and it was like my mom was like, oh yeah, this is like a Bible for young people, and it would just like make it sound like how people talked when we were how like my brother talked when I was in middle school. He's older than me, and it felt a little bit more real. So maybe this feels real to them, but I'd tone it down quite a bit personally.
here's another point. It says, he said this ain't about cuffing season, for the Holy Spirit will live rent free in you, and your boy Jesus will be a divine bro. At the bottom, it says, some ancient manuscripts add, for God doesn't even know how to take an L. He's just built different.
Oh, dude. See,
I mean, that
at the
goes
end there,
hard.
at the end there, like, there's, dude, there's a lot of pastors that I know that I don't know that they get this, but I know one guy who would who would think this is great. What was what was the end there after the whole cup and season thing? It was
I'll read it to you one more time. And I'm kind of going through a little different pieces, but it says at the very bottom. And you know how, like, when a Bible has some of the context at
right,
the bottom, kind of describing like why a word would be used or whatnot, right? It
right.
says some ancient manuscripts add, for God doesn't even know how to take an L. He's just built different.
See,
And
I
it's
like
got three emojis with like the strong man thing.
dude. See that one right there. I get that. I
I
like
mean,
that. I like that.
it's interesting. It's something. I'll tell you that. It's something.
There's like I said, there's some stuff that makes me a little, it makes me cringe, but I don't know. I'm not personally gonna read it. We also have. Have you ever read the Hawaiian Pigeon Bible?
Yep.
I ha-
Yep. I've read some stuff from it, and it's very different than
I have a
your
lot of
Orthodox.
family. I have a lot of family that speaks in a very thick pigeon accent, and I'm like, honestly, I should send them a link to the Pigeon Bible or send them
The
Hawaiian
Pigeon
Pigeon
Bible.
Bibles. They honestly would probably really get a lot out of that. Like, ugh.
I
There
mean,
was a
it
pastor.
can be
There was
cool
a
though to feel like. Say what you're saying.
there was a pastor that I had a meeting with him at a Starbucks, and he was telling me how he used the Hawaiian Pigeon Bible to give a sermon because it simplified things so much. And I was like, oh my gosh, Hawaiian people and the way they speak is a little bit more simple than it's more simple English than
Hmm.
a lot of these versions of the Bible. Like it kind of really gets to the point, you know. But
It's
I
like a
think
whole
I think
different
with
dialect.
that, what's the name of that version of the Bible that you were just reading out of?
It's called the Gen Z Bible. Is what
Yeah,
it
I think
is.
the Gen Z Bible is getting back into the convoluted. You know, it's like the
Mhm.
opposite of the King James. It's convoluted because it's too modern, and the King James is
It's
hard for people because it's convoluted. I guess because it's
it's old English kind
old
of a
English.
thing. It feels like you're
Hmm.
speaking from 1,000 years ago. Is the vibe you get, even though it wasn't that long ago. The King James is from 1600s, but it's it's interesting. It's interesting.
Right. Oh, it's wild.
Oh yeah, for young people though, I do think it adds an element of people are trying to appeal to them and recognize them, and so it's not so much them having to come to you. It's like you're kind of going to them and where they're at with that
Right.
style of Bible. Now I'm sure
I
people
think.
don't have. Not everybody speaks quite like that. Like, yo, your
Oh
boy
yeah.
Jesus was so divine, bro. Like, but
Well, I think if the intent behind it is good, and if it's available as a tool to help people, then by all means. But I think if the intent behind it is malicious, then that's a completely different issue. But my
exactly,
assumption would be is that it's meant as a positive tool. So
it is. You got a hard question I'll ask you. Actually, I don't think it's that tough always. There's things here and there, but if you were to talk to some of these young folks, how would you go about convincing them that the Bible is true, especially over like some of these other religions?
so you and I both actually had a conversation with somebody the other day where initially their issue was they were like Jesus isn't even real. I was like, yes, he is. He was a real person. He walked this earth. There's tons of places that acknowledges Jesus' existence. Now, the hard part with talking to these people about having a relationship with Jesus and why that's important and why Christianity is so important is that most of the time they just want to shut off. You say something that um, either challenges their current belief system or goes against their absolute goals in life, right? Or their immediate directive on where they're going, they just shut off
Yep. When it
so quick. It's
challenges kind
just
of
bam.
their core values a little bit, you know.
So what I think the important thing to do, right, is everybody's seeking a community right now. And what we need to do is work to bring them into the community, right? And tell them
Hmm.
like you are welcome here. Absolutely 100%. You are welcome here anytime. Do you need anything? We're here. We are like you, and it needs to be that. It needs to be a community, right? That functions well together. We need to be the example. I think more than anything, if you lead by example, then people will start to understand. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
having those people in your communities is super important, uh, especially once they start to find a home there. That's kind of the big thing. And then they start to open up and really understand because you are the five closest people. You are most like the five closest people to you.
Nope. I've heard
So
that. You know, the five
if the
people
five
around you is
people,
kind of who you are.
yeah. So if those five people are all in the community of a church, where are you going to end up?
You're most likely going to be in that church, or you're going to be moving in that direction. You're most likely to be moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's like the feeling you get a feeling from being in that community that just can't be quite matched by a lot of the other things that are going on. You know,
Oh, for sure.
that's one thing I've always loved about being in the church and whatnot is it is that feeling of community, feeling like no matter where you go, if I go to New York or if I go to Pennsylvania or if I go to California and I find a church, let's say the Free Methodist Church, is there's going to be a little piece that feels like home there. You know, there's going to be people that you know that you vibe with and they're your folks essentially, and you can always have a
Mm-hmm.
place there.
So to go back to
Exactly.
that Bible verse that I started with, God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. So if this comes all the way back to um, if we love one another, show them love, help people and continue to help them, right? That's how we impact this younger generation in a positive way as Christians. And they get overlooked a lot. And I
Hmm.
think that that's just it's just too important to not share.
I agree. I agree 100%. Well, Garrison, I want to say thank you for coming on the show, being part of the Nolan Bylenga podcast on our first episode. And we're probably going to have you back. I'll
Heck
invite
yeah.
you at least, have a good conversation. And to our viewers, Be looking out for the next episodes. We'll be posting an episode probably here weekly and bi-weekly, and we'll be back.
Hey, and good luck at selection.
Oh, thank you. But that's other news, other words, ROTC stuff.
Oh man, thanks for having me, Nolan.
Welcome.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for coming on.